everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bear's Guide to a 5. So, where did our families come from is the first question, right? Where the heck did they come from? And now it's all over the world at this point. So, the US migration patterns, what we have to understand is that once again, as these world events are happening and populations are changing and development is occurring, people from different parts of the world migrate to the United States. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the internal migration inside the United States. And I know this seems random, but one major migration trend that happened in the US was the migration from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, the Rust Belt being the shaded area in brown. Because that's where things rust. That's why it's called that. But it was just a place of heavy industry, of lots of factories. And as the U.S. deindustrialized, we basically, through globalization, sent out factories all around the world. More jobs opened up in the southern parts of the United States in the tourist economy or the service industry, so people moved there. And this is just showing the stuff that the Rust Belt deindustrializes. People left, and then, or the factories leave the northern areas, and people move to the south in the search of jobs. These are the given states that are the Sun Belt: Florida, Texas, California, Arizona. Those are our big earning states, the ones with big GDPs, lots of potential money to be made, service industry based, so on and so forth. And if these words have confused you, that's okay, because we're going to talk about it more way later and in the future. But while we're talking about migration, you should at least know the trend. Now, this, when one area benefits from another place losing, it's called a backwash effect. Once again, kind of random knowledge, but it will make sense in the long run. Okay, so global migration patterns. Um, if you look at the map, we can see that the purple shaded areas are the net out migration. That means more people are leaving than coming in. And if you look at the brown shaded areas, that means they have a net in migration. So you should be able to see at a pattern, it's pretty predictable that the net out migration is coming from the developed world or developing world, and people are going to the developed world. So, this chart that you see in front of you, specifically talking about the United States, we have three peaks of migration. The US will always take immigrants, right? People will always travel to the United States. But we have three peaks in our history, and you have to know the three peaks, where the people came from, and what caused these peaks to happen. So, we have to start with Europe's demographic transition. We have belabored the point of the demographic transition model. And we know that Europe went through the demographic transition before anybody else because they went through the Industrial Revolution first. And we know when you go through the Industrial Revolution, you go to stage 2 of the demographic transition and you have the population explosion. And that's what causes peak 1. In northern and western Europe, they go through the Industrial Revolution. We're talking England, Germany, Ireland. They go through the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s. Their population explodes as they go to stage 2. And there's too many people and a lack of jobs, which we know a lack of jobs is a huge push factor because the number one reason people migrate is in the search of jobs. So we have a massive migration from Europe into the United States looking for factory jobs in the new industry, stuff that didn't require a lot of skill. So then, still focused on Europe, we get to the second peak in the US immigration peaks. And this happens in the early 1900s. Essentially, the Industrial Revolution now spreads to Southeast Europe. They go into stage 2 of the demographic transition. They go through the population explosion. They go through the lack of jobs, the same exact thing. So then people leave and go to the United States because there's more space there, there's less people there, and there's more jobs. So it's the same thing. It literally is the same thing as Northwest Europe. Same exact thing, just slightly different time periods right after each other. Now the third peak, not from Europe, because by this time, by the middle of the 1900s, we're talking 1950s, 1970s, Europe is no longer a sender of migrants because now they have gotten into stage 3 of the demographic transition. They're becoming a developed nation. They are now taking in immigrants. But we know during the middle of the 1900s, the medical revolution happens. That's what gets Europe to stage 3. And we know that Latin America and Asia are now in stage 2 of the demographic transition. Because they're in stage 2, they go through the population explosion. Because there's a population explosion, there's too many people, there's a lack of jobs. And once again, the number one reason for migration is for jobs, right? So you see a wave of people coming from Latin America and Asia. And this is the current trend generally with where we see immigrants from. It's either Latin America or Asia to this day. But the peak right after World War II and the Great Depression, once we recover from all that, we see a huge peak or a huge spike in migrants. Now, there are non-demographic, non-economic reasons for migration into the U.S. What we mentioned in the 3 peaks is all tied to demographics and economics. The explosion in the population tied to a lack of jobs. But there are other reasons why people migrate. Obviously, there's cultural political reasons. If you're trying to escape religious persecution or political persecution, freedom in the United States with freedom of religion is a big deal, so you could practice whatever you wanted. And of course, we see tons of political refugees from Latin America and Asia during the 3rd peak. I know Asia's not written on there for political refugees, but we're talking about the Korean War, we're talking about the Vietnam War, the Cold War, everything that happened in the mid-1900s in Asia. So we see a massive amount of political refugees from those areas too. So remember, the main reason that people migrate was demographic. It is economic, but there are other reasons, and it's important to remember those things. So what do you need to know today? Already done. You got to know what causes internal migration in the United States, which is generally weather, preference, and economic reasons. But more importantly, it's really important to understand the 3 peaks of migration into the United States, where the people come from, what pushed them out, and what pulled them to the U.S. And then finally, make sure to think of other factors of migration that aren't demographics or money when considering migration into the U.S. Don't forget that people are trying to escape political persecution or that they're refugees, right? We can't forget that idea. Okay, so that's it. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you know when new videos drop. And as always, this is Bear's Guide 205. We'll see you next time.